Today we're going to talk about ecological relationships. The goal of this video is to describe how organisms cooperate and compete in ecosystems. Let's begin with this question. Why do organisms interact with each other? Well, many organisms share a habitat, and a habitat is the actual area in the ecosystem where an organism lives, including all of its abiotic and biotic resources. But each organism has a unique niche, and a niche is all of the things an organism needs and does within its habitat. Take bees, for example. They not only make honey, but in the process, they pollinate many flowers, and that's their role in that ecosystem or their niche. The fact that organisms have a unique niche leads to interactions and relationships between organisms. One type of interaction is predation. This is when one animal kills and eats another for food. In that interaction, there is a predator. That's the organism that hunts and kills another for food. And there's the prey. That's the organism that is killed and consumed as food. Examples would be an owl hunting and consuming a mouse, or a bear catching and eating a fish. Now, a predator prey graph shows the cycling of the populations in response to each other over time. Here's an example of a predator versus prey graph. The solid line in the picture represents the prey, and the dashed line in the picture represents the predator. So let's practice reading this graph. At point A, the population of the prey is less than the population of the predators, and the population of the predators has been increasing while the population of the prey has been decreasing. One explanation for this pattern is that the presence of more predators results in more consumption of prey, and this causes a decline in the population of prey. At point B in this image, the populations of predator and prey are approximately the same. However, based on the trend just prior to point B, the population of prey is increasing and the population of predators is decreasing. One explanation for this pattern is that the presence of less predators results in less consumption of prey, which causes an increase in the population of prey. Now let's talk about a keystone species. This is a species that holds the ecosystem together. It is crucial for the survival of the other species in the ecosystem. Because if a keystone species were removed, the ecosystem would be dramatically impacted. Predators are often keystone species. Now, why would that be the case? Predators keep prey species from growing exponentially. So now let's talk about competition. Competition is a relationship that exists between two or more organisms that are fighting for the same limited resource. And competition can come in two forms. Interspecific competition is where competition is occurring between different species. Intraspecific competition is where competition is occurring within the same species. But with that understanding of competition, we can now talk about the competitive exclusion principle. The main idea of this principle is that no two organisms can occupy the same niche at the same time. If the organisms are very different, one is probably better fit than the other. And so one will tend to survive, the one that's more fit, and the other won't. If the organisms are similar, it will take a fight to see who will win, and the loser will have to find a different niche to occupy. So far in this video, I've focused on competition, but now let's talk about how organisms cooperate. So, any interaction that involves a close, physical, long term relationship between two species is considered an example of symbiosis. And in symbiosis, one species always benefits. These interactions, these relationships are always interspecific. They're between two different species. There are three types of symbiosis. The first is parasitism. This is where one organism, the parasite, benefits from the relationship, while the other organism, the host, is harmed. A great example of this is a tapeworm in a human's intestine. So, if you get a tapeworm, the tapeworm absorbs the nutrients from the food that you eat, which steals nutrients away from your body. The human in this case actually ends up being harmed because they're not getting the nutrients that they need when they eat their food, but the tapeworm is benefited because they're getting all that nutrients from the food that you eat. It is crucial in parasitic relationships that the parasite not kill the host. Now, why might that be? Well, if the host dies, then the parasite is no longer benefited. The parasite only gets those benefits if the host is alive. So, for a parasite host relationship to persist, each population must not have too devastating of an effect on the other. And the parasite must allow the host to live long enough for the parasite to survive and reproduce and so spread. Another example of parasitism is a tick on a dog. The tick benefits, but in the process, the dog can be harmed. Okay, a second type of symbiosis is commensalism. This is when one organism is benefited while the other is unaffected. That organism is neither benefited nor harmed. And a great example of this is cattle and cattle egrets. Cattle egrets are the birds you see in this picture. And the cattle egret benefits when insects in the grass are flushed out while the cows eat. And the cows in this case are unaffected by the presence of the cattle egret. But again, the cattle egret benefits from the activity of the cow. Last, we have mutualism. And this is when both organisms that are involved in the relationship benefit. So in this relationship, both organisms help one another survive. And a good example of this are clownfish and anemones. You might have heard of anemones if you watched Finding Nemo. So, sea anemones catch prey by stunning them with their poisonous tentacles. Clownfish are immune to the anemone's poison, and so the clownfish can actually live within the tentacles. And so those tentacles provide protection to the clownfish. That's the benefit for the clownfish. In return, the clownfish cleans the anemone's tentacles, keeping the anemone free from parasites. And so that's the benefit for the anemone. In this case, both organisms benefit, both help each other survive. To sum up, we've seen some reasons organisms have to compete for resources, and we've seen three ways organisms cooperate, namely parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. This little picture nicely represents the difference between those three relationships. In all three types of symbiosis, at least one of the organisms benefit. This organism is represented in the picture as the smiley face. However, in commensalism, the other organism is neither helped nor harmed. That's why they aren't smiling and they're not frowning. They're just neutral. In parasitism, the other organism is harmed. That's represented as the frowny face with a piece missing. And in mutualism, the other organism benefits. And so that's why in mutualism, you have two smiley faces. Both organisms benefit.